Hey Sugar Geeks, happy almost Halloween. Today we are going to be making a super fun ice cream drip cake. Emphasis on the I. This is a really cool cake full of fun techniques like learning how to make black buttercream, using water ganache, and of course making a giant gummy eyeball. Coming up next on the Sugar Geek Show. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is crumb coat our cake. I am using my very delicious pumpkin cake. It's chilled so that it's easy to stack because it's very moist. Just 3 layers, smells so good. I'm just using my easy buttercream frosting, but you could use cream cheese frosting, and I, highly suggest that for the center, but I've never done like stripes with cream cheese frosting, so sticking with my easy buttercream. I always shoot for about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of buttercream on the inside because it looks nice when you slice it. I should mention that I made my buttercream super white by adding just a teeny tiny drop of purple food coloring and then probably 2 tablespoons of white food coloring, and it just makes it super white. All right, just a thin coat. Crumb coat literally means to seal in the crumbs, so don't stress about this. Don't spend a lot of time. If you are confused about how to stack and crumb coat a cake, you should check out my video on how to make your very first cake ever. I go over all of those basic details and more. Okay, so now into the freezer. Just to freeze it quickly, like get that butter firmed up so we can go ahead and move on to the next part. But we're just trying to get it cold, not frozen. Okay, my cake is frozen, and now we're gonna go ahead and do a final coat of buttercream. My buttercream is actually pretty bubbly, don't hate me, but I skipped my own directions and didn't mix for 15 minutes at the end to remove all the bubbles. But if you want super smooth buttercream, just go ahead and let it mix on low with the paddle attachment for like 15 to 20 minutes until it is super smooth and creamy. You want to make sure that your final coat of buttercream is really thick, because if your stripes are not deep enough, your stripes are not going to like show up very clean. I mean, these are probably already going to be cursed because of all the bubbles in my buttercream. So you always want to be working on a chilled cake when you do this layer of buttercream, because when we scrape it, you want those lines to be nice and sharp. This is a 10-inch tall bench scraper from Esther Cakes. You'll want to have a scraper that's taller than the height of the cake to get the sides nice and smooth. And of course, you'll need a cake comb for the stripes. Highly recommend the bangle comb, also from Esther Cakes. So the key is to go very slowly, scrape off a little bit at a time, and go deep. So I'm just going to keep going basically until the buttercream touches this inside part. I love the bangle comb because one side makes really thick stripes like we're making today, and the other side makes thinner stripes. So you get 2 combs in one. This is the Innovative Sugarworks turntable, and I love it because it's obviously got a super smooth top, and it has a little locking mechanism down here so that when I actually start decorating and I don't want it to turn anymore, it stops turning. Notice how my stripes are almost down to the actual cake. Like, that's normal. I think that's probably why people get stressed about not going deep enough. And then I'm just going to smooth out the top edge to make it flat. Okay, I'm gonna put this all into the freezer so that this gets really, really firm. And while that's freezing up, we're going to start working on our gelatin eyeball. Okay, so this is my jelly island recipe. Basically what it is it's water, it's gelatin, it's flavoring, and sugar and citric acid, which is basically what Jell-O is made of. So what I'm going to do is basically start heating up the water and the gelatin mixture just to the point where the gelatin is dissolved. You don't want to boil it because that actually breaks down the gelatin and makes it weaker. So, and it also dissolves the sugar, which is great. So I can already see this is starting to get really thin. I know that the sugar is dissolving. Okay, so you see there's just steam that is just now starting to rise. It's done. So here's my pineapple flavoring. You use it just like, vanilla extract or anything. Just add as much or as little as you want. And then I would add maybe 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid. So this is like pure sourness. And I got this off of Amazon, but you can actually get citric acid in the canning food section at like the grocery store. So now I'm gonna pour my gelatin mixture into a container. All of these bubbles rise to the top and create foam, and then you can scoop that foam off with a spoon, and then you'll have super clear gelatin. Okay, so now that we have our flavored, yummy gelatin mixture, we're gonna add some white food coloring. You can also use milk, cream, or coconut milk in the gelatin if you don't wanna use white food coloring, which coconut milk would go so good with pineapple. Make sure to set aside a little bit of the clear gelatin to use for the irises. Okay, so this is my mold, my sphere mold. This is the smaller one that's 2.5 inches. Just put that together. I got this mold from Chicago School of Mold Making, and it just is very expensive. So if you want to invest in a really high quality sphere mold, go for it. But if not, I would suggest just getting a spherical ice mold from Amazon. So once your clear gelatin has cooled down to about 90 degrees, you just want to add a few drops to the bottom of the mold and let it set up. This should take only about 5 minutes. And now we're going to take some black food coloring. I'm using Americolor just right out of the jar on my fine-tipped paintbrush, and I'm just going to paint a very small little circle for the pupil. And then I'm going to just add a few little dots around the pupil, kind of around the outside too, to define the iris. Don't use a ton of food coloring because we don't want this to be super wet and take a long time to dry. And then I'm going to start taking some electric blue food coloring and some white food coloring, and I'm going to start doing some stripes. You could use green, yellow, whatever color you want the eye to be. Just be mindful of the pupil, making sure that you're not, messing up the edges too much. Here you can see I'm making a brown eye, and then I also did a green one as well. Just keep layering up your colors mixed in with the white, and then let it dry completely. Depending on the temperature of the room, this could take 20 minutes or more. If it's taking a really long time to dry, you can even put a fan on it. Go ahead and close up your mold and seal it with a rubber band to make sure it doesn't leak. And then we're going to pour in our cooled 90 degrees Fahrenheit white gelatin into the mold all the way until it runs out the top, because it does shrink a bit as it cools. And now this is going into the fridge for at least 2 hours until it's fully set up. And then when we take it out, you have this really shiny, really cool eyeball. Look how pretty that looks. Super shiny, really realistic. I love it. I did have a little bit of bleeding because I didn't let my colors dry all the way. So just so you know, that's what happens when you don't let them dry. Now moving on to coloring the eyeball with some pink food coloring for the veins. Completely ignore the fact that there is a scoop out of the front right here. I made this video before I figured out the better way to do it by just painting it inside the mold. This is just electric pink food coloring. You could do like a whole bowl of these. All right, my eyeball is done. Let's go ahead and finish decorating our cake. So let's make some black buttercream. Obviously, we need black food coloring. I'm using Super Black by Americolor because it's very concentrated. And then I have some chocolate buttercream ready to go. This is just easy buttercream, and I actually poured in probably an equal amount of chocolate ganache because ganache is, like already pretty dark. You could just use cocoa butter too, and it's always kind of like this light chocolate brown color. You could just color straight ganache too. Ideally, that's what you would use because then it would take very, very little black food coloring to color the ganache. But people always ask, but it's more difficult to color actual buttercream, so we're gonna do that just for the sake of a challenge. So what I wanna do is take out about 1/3 of the total amount of buttercream from the bowl. And then we're gonna add probably about a tablespoon of the Super Black. You can always add more, but you can't take it out. So be conservative when you first add, because if you add too much, you will taste it and it tastes nasty. And then we are going to put this into the microwave and melt it for about 30 seconds or so until it's mostly melted. Okay, so you can see this is just pretty watery and soupy. And what this does is it basically combines the water molecules of the buttercream with the fatty molecules of the butter so that it makes an emulsion, and that will actually increase how dark the color looks. If you just try to mix the water-based food coloring into the butter-based buttercream, it doesn't actually mix. It just disperses the color within the buttercream and just looks really light. But when you actually just heat up a little portion of the buttercream, it fuses with the color and becomes one. And then you just drizzle that in. And because this is not hot, it's not going to melt the other buttercream. That's literally it, you guys. So this is kind of a dark gray, but I want you to understand that it gets darker over time. So always shoot for a very slightly lighter shade of whatever color you're trying to make, and then it will get darker within 24 hours. So this is the buttercream we made earlier, and it's darkened a little bit. It's not like totally black, but it's pretty close. All right, got our cold, very cold turntable. I'm gonna put some black buttercream into a piping bag and snip off the tip. So now I'm just gonna fill in that part. And I'm already telling you now it's not gonna be perfect because I am not the queen of striped buttercream cakes. I don't know. I like to do things that are hard for me because I wanna get better at them. All right, you guys ready? Start scraping. Beautiful, done. What if I just posted this to Instagram and I got 1 million likes? Like, I love the rustic stripes, Liz Merrick. This is so trendy. I'm sick and tired of these clean stripes. I'm not gonna play you guys like that though. Okay, so basically the stripes have emerged, right? So now we're just gonna do a few more passes to just kind of get those little speckles from the deeper parts. This is when it helps for the first layer of buttercream to be super, super smooth, like when you do the stripes, because every little indent, black buttercream goes in that indent, and then you have to scrape it off. Okay, see? We're getting there. I feel like I need my taller scraper now. Look at that! I feel like that looks pretty good. Got a little hamburger theme going on here. And then a quick little cleanup of the top edge. Does not matter what the top looks like because we're putting a drip on there. Okay, now carefully pick up the cake. I'm gonna have to use my spatula to get underneath that cake board, and I'm gonna put some cute sprinkles on the bottom to hide that edge. I just put my fun Halloween sprinkles in a big bowl and get to sprinkling. So I'm just gonna hold the cake just in this hand and just press. That just covers that ugly bottom that I just made. Also cute, makes it cuter. This is just a sprinkles mix I got from Joann's. I think it's a Wilton mix. Look, so adorable. Now I'm going to transfer that onto my cake board. You can also just use a plate if you want. And let's start making that drip. Okay, so we're going to make water ganache. If you have not been around for the last 3 years, it's a drip that's just made from Melties and water, and it drips perfectly. So I'm adding candy melts and water together, and then I'm going to microwave that for like 30 seconds. You just want to go slow and steady so you don't burn the chocolate. So I'm just going to kind of push it around and just like, oh my gosh, it looks terrible. It's okay. So whenever you're melting chocolate, if you ever have the instinct to just like melt it for longer, just remember that it heats unevenly in a microwave. So it'll heat really hot right against the bowl and it'll be like ice cold in the center. So you want to heat for like a minute, mix it around, and then maybe another 15 seconds. So it looks kind of broken and bad, and you just whisk and whisk and whisk and whisk, and eventually it turns into the perfect drip. And it's really important to just make sure that your cake is chilled so that the drip sets up and doesn't like run all the way down the cake. So now that we have our chocolate drip all dripified, all we have to do is add color. So easy. I just added a couple drops of electric pink and a few of white too to make it really nice and opaque and a pretty color. Basically, we don't want to drip this until it's cooled down just a touch, like ideally around 90 degrees. Otherwise, it's just going to drip all the way down the cake. So I'm just going to set this aside for a minute. I'm going to color some white buttercream a little bit with also some light pink, because if this cake was covered in fondant, the gelatin would melt if it was touching fondant. So it has to have a barrier of either buttercream or cocoa butter. That's a way that you can paint that onto it. So otherwise it'll just literally start seeping. Technically, I could put this eyeball directly onto this cake with the drip and it would be totally fine. But I want it to look like ice cream. Here is our little ice cream cone. Take my cone and I'm gonna go around the edge like that. And then I'm gonna take my sprinkles, put some on the edge like that. I love the little ghosts on them. That's cute. And let's just transfer this water ganache to a piping bag so it's easier to control. Or you can use a spoon if that's what you're more comfortable with. Okay, let's do a little test. Make sure it's not gonna run all the way down. It's very drippy, but it's okay. We're gonna go for it. Just dripping. I go across and then drip. Across and then drip. Some people are so specific with their drips. I ain't about that life. Like, I just gonna go for it. The rest of it goes up here. So if you ever make water ganache and you're like, Liz, this is running too far down the cake, it's because it's too hot. Last thing, you guys ready? So we have our eyeball, and I'm gonna put some buttercream on the bottom because it's an ice cream scoop, obviously. And then that goes right there. Can you guys tell I'm having fun? And then a little bit of buttercream just on this guy so it sticks. Ta-da! Look how adorable! And for a finishing touch, I'm gonna add some more sprinkles to the top. So freaking cute, I love it. What do you think of my ice cream cake, Avalon?
It's good. Have a slice.
A slice? I was thinking maybe you want to take a bite of the giant eyeball.
Ooh. Yummy.
Does it taste like pineapples?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Who knew that eyeballs tasted like pineapples? So that's it, guys. That's how you make a really fun ice cream drip cake. I'm Liz. This is Avalon. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Happy Halloween. Boo!
Good job. How do you get to be such a good actress?
I even said boo.
You did. You did such a good job.